performing while sitting, my chamber music and my orchestra, I would actually find a good straight back, flat chair, and I would sit and practice that stuff, because then I would be practicing my good sitting posture. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Other questions? Is there somebody over here? Okay, well, oh, yes.
I just had a question about your solo playing. Do you change fingerings or bowings and things like in the standard repertoire as you play them over the years?
Yes, so I look at an interpretation as having a shelf life. It's not about necessarily, well, it's a balance. Sometimes it's how many years since I last rethought everything. So if it's been 7 or 8 years and I'm still doing the fingerings from 7 or 8 years ago, not only fingerings, but rubatos, bowing, every element of my interpretation, then I think, okay, I've hopefully me might not agree with the former me. Let's see if we do. The other thing is if you've played it a lot of times, so maybe I've only played that piece a couple of times over the last 7 or 8 years, but as I said, it's been so many years that I really should question my previous decisions. Sometimes it's only been 3 years, but I've played that piece like with 20 different orchestras over the last 3 years, and therefore I've played it so many times that I might have matured with that piece, even though maybe as a 3 years older musician, I haven't changed that much yet as a musician. So it depends on how many times I've played the piece, how long it's been since I rethought it. So it would be a waste of time if I played the Tchaikovsky Concerto 2 months ago to question everything I did with the Tchaikovsky Concerto again. There are better things to do with my life, like learn a new sonata. But I don't want to just never again just say, okay, these are my fingerings, boom, because that, certainly sometimes something will spontaneously occur to you either in the practice room or even on stage. But then you also want to have those moments when you say, okay, now I'm going to go back to the drawing board. I'm going to listen to 20 or 30 different other people's interpretations and make notes about their tempos, about where they put expressive slides, about what kind of spiccatos they use. I'm going to look at the score and remind myself, oh, the bassoon has this line here. What does that mean for how I'm playing my counter melody? I'm going to just go back to ground zero and build it up from scratch. And the interesting thing is a lot of times I come to the exact same conclusions that I came to 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And there's a consistency because, in fact, I am the same person with the same personality I was born with. Other times I will definitely find cool new ideas. Sometimes I'll still like my old idea, but it's like I'm a little bored with it, so I like another idea equally well, and I'll be like, okay, let's do something fresh, let's do something different. Other times I'll be like, oh my gosh, how come I never realized that a much better solution is this? Good thing I thought of it now. So, it's just a question of, but then the things that I do exactly the same way, then it still was worth putting in that rethinking time, because then I have a newfound conviction sitting behind it, or perhaps I have the same ideas but different reasons for doing them. Instead of just doing it because I like the tone quality, I'm doing it because of all the options I experimented with. It makes the most sense with what the flute is doing and what the phrase is 2 phrases later. Now I have extra additional reasons for doing that thing that I was sort of doing instinctually before. Sometimes your instincts are spot on. Sometimes your instincts are okay, but a thought out answer is actually going to be much more successful than what your instincts initially led you to. Sometimes something that you can completely rationalize and justify is just not going to be effective, and intellectually it seems like it should, but you just can't pull it off, in which case you have to say, okay, if I think it should work but it's not, then I have to go with what's going to feel good. And so it's always a question of listening to yourself with outside ears and doing a lot of experimenting. All right, well, if anybody has any further questions, don't ever hesitate to email me. I answer questions every 2 weeks on the next episode of my Violin Adventures podcast. And in fact, some of the Violin Adventures podcast episodes are very violin specific or string music specific, but a lot of them, like I have one episode called something like How to Prepare for a Chamber Music Rehearsal. Well, everybody can take advice from that because it mostly has nothing to do with the actual violin. So you might want to check that out if you have time, my Violin Adventures podcast, because that's there for you. That's the whole point of it. So it's great to hear you guys, and good luck.
tell them about your recording.
Oh, okay.
Rachel has brought some of the books she has published and some of her CDs. If you want to buy them, she'll be glad to sign it for you before she leaves. Two words that are thrown around a lot in music are passion and commitment. And I can't think of a person more committed or more passionate about what we do than Rachel. When she told me, and when she volunteered that she would do a class for us at Birch Creek, I was driving actually from the cop, and she told me I had told her before about something else, and then she said, well, I can do a class. And I And I was so happy when we hung up the phone, and I went home, and I was okay, we did it. And then she said, I have a week that is very open, the first week of Birch Creek. And I said, great, what day? And then as we got closer to it, she emailed again very apologetically and said, I have to do a photo shoot in New York on Wednesday, so Thursday is not going to work. Would Friday work for you guys? I said, yes. Friday works, Saturday or Sunday, and okay, so what was a very open week for Rachel turned out into being a very hectic week with a trip to New York, and she's here with her family for just overnight. They drove late last night because you were flying in from where yesterday?
Well, it was complicated. We had to get from the end of Long Island to Islip to Baltimore to Chicago, and then
yes, and this was the day before, so they arrived last night. They're here to do this class today with that much energy, and then she has one day in Chicago, and then what?
Well, Israel, Indiana, Kansas City, Dallas, Quebec, Colorado, North Carolina, and then I'm home.
Thank you so much for being here.
But actually, Ricardo and I played in, it wasn't exactly youth orchestra, but it was the training orchestra of the Chicago Symphony, the Civic Orchestra of Chicago. We were there at the same time, the late 80s, early 90s.
She was a little kid.
So when we were like you, learning the orchestral repertoire, we were doing that together, and it's just awesome to see him all grown up and
more grown up than that. Okay.
And someday you guys are going to be on the faculty of things like this, so it's a question of keeping the music going.
Yeah. Thank you so much. But yeah, again, Rachel brought some books and some things you're interested in. You can leave them with us, and we can put them in the